All right, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we're going deep on something really, really fundamental to how we learn, how we get better at anything at all, really.
Yeah.
And that is self-regulated learning, or SRL, as the cool kids call it.
Right. Exactly.
So we're going to look at what is it actually, like when we say self-regulated learning, what are we really talking about?
hmm
Why is it so important for anyone who is trying to improve, which is, all of us?
Right. Yeah.
And then how has the thinking on this actually changed over time? What have we learned?
Yeah. And we have a great piece of research to guide us today,
Yeah.
and that's how far have we moved toward the integration of theory and practice in self-regulation
Right.
by Monique Bookertz and Eduardo Caskeller.
Yeah, this is a really cool piece because it's kind of like a progress report from like the front lines of educational psychology on this
Sorry.
super important idea.
Yeah.
So our goal today is to take all of that research and pull out the most important insights for you, our listener, to help you understand how to take control of your own learning,
Yes.
how to really like manage your focus and your motivation, your effort,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately your achievements, right?
Mhm.
So let's just jump right into it. What is self-regulated learning?
I guess in the simplest terms, I think you can think of self-regulated learning as being the pilot of your own learning journey, right?
Okay.
So it's this multi-component iterative process where you're actively guiding your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and even adjusting aspects of your environment to help you reach your goals,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about passively soaking up information, right?
Yeah.
It's really about actively steering yourself towards your objectives.
Okay, I like this pilot analogy. It sounds pretty hands-on. Now,
hmm
now the research mentions that initially SRL was thought of as like very, very deliberate and often conscious, right? Like you were really putting a lot of conscious effort into learning in a certain way.
hmm
Is that still the main way that researchers view it today?
Well, you're right. In the early days, it the idea was that SRL was this very intentional, mindful process, right?
Yeah.
Where you're very aware of how you're learning, and you're making these conscious decisions about how you're going to approach a task.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, it was contrasted with this idea of learning that's more directed by external forces, right? Like a teacher who's telling you exactly what to do step by step.
Mm-hmm.
But I think our understanding of SRL has really grown
Yeah.
since then. And while that conscious, deliberate focus is definitely still often a part of it, I think we also now realize that a lot of our self-regulatory actions can also happen much more automatically,
Yeah.
almost without us even thinking about it.
Interesting, interesting. So it's not always a case of consciously saying, okay, like right now I need to check if I'm understanding this.
Right.
Sometimes it just sort of happens.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and what's also become clear is that the line between self-regulated learning and externally regulated learning,
Mm-hmm.
um, it isn't quite as clear cut
Yeah.
as we once thought.
Right.
You know, very often learning involves this kind of blend of both,
Yeah.
right? So you might be working on a project that you chose yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still keeping an eye on that deadline.
Yeah.
You're taking feedback from others
Right.
into account, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So if SRL is this multi-layered process, then what are the key ways that we actually do it? It's not just like one thing that we do.
You're absolutely right. It's not like a single switch that you flip. Right. It's more like a toolkit
Okay.
of strategies that learners can use.
Yeah.
And researchers often talk about these what they call adaptive strategies, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are the strategies that tend to lead to good learning outcomes.
Okay.
And they often contrast those with what are called maladaptive strategies.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
so the ones that might actually hinder learning.
Yeah, yeah. But the paper brings up a really interesting point here, doesn't it? That something a teacher might see as bad for learning could actually be helpful for a student in a social situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is a really, really insightful point, I think. So imagine you have a student who doesn't understand something that's being taught in class,
Right.
right? But they just kind of nod along anyway
Uh-huh.
to avoid looking out of step with their friends.
Yeah.
Right. Now, from the teacher's perspective, they might look at that and say, well, that's really hindering their learning,
Yeah.
right? Because they're not seeking help,
Yeah.
they're not asking questions.
Yeah.
But from the student's perspective, it might be a very adaptive strategy, right?
Yeah.
It might be a way to maintain their social standing,
Right. Right.
avoid embarrassment,
Yeah.
right? So what looks maladaptive or bad for learning, in isolation,
Yeah.
might actually be quite adaptive
Yeah.
for other really important reasons
Yeah.
in that particular moment.
That's a really important point, isn't it?
Yeah.
That learning doesn't happen in a vacuum,
Right.
right? It's all part of this bigger picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So beyond this broad idea of adaptive versus maladaptive, what specific types of strategies have researchers really focused on when it comes to SRL? The paper mentions kind of an initial focus on learning strategies themselves.
Yeah, that's right. So in the early days of SRO research, I think there was a real emphasis on these learning strategies, right?
Okay.
And this often meant kind of a deep dive into what are called metacognitive strategies.
Right.
These are the strategies you use to kind of think about and manage your own thinking
Okay. Yeah.
and learning.
Okay. Metacognitive. That sounds a little academic.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some real world examples of what these strategies look like when we're trying to learn something new?
Sure. So imagine, you're starting a new hobby, or you're trying to get your head around a really complicated report at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Metacognitive strategies would be things like figuring out what you already know
Okay.
about that topic,
Yeah.
and what you still need to find out,
Mhm.
right? It would be about actively looking for information from different sources, right?
Yeah.
Comparing different perspectives
Yeah.
to try to get this kind of well-rounded understanding of the topic.
Yeah.
Constantly checking if what you're learning actually makes sense to you, right?
Mhm.
And regularly assessing your own progress.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Am I actually moving towards my goal here? It's like having this kind of mental checklist
Right.
for how you're going to approach a task.
Okay, so things like making notes, summarizing information in your own words, asking yourself some questions as you go.
Mhm.
Those would all be examples.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And research has actually shown that when students are explicitly taught these strategies, it can really boost their learning.
Yeah.
Especially when they become more metacognitively aware, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they understand not just, how to use the strategy,
Yeah.
but when and why to use that strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
In different learning situations.
In different situations.
Yeah.
The paper also really stresses that teachers play a vital role here.
Yeah.
It's not just about teaching the strategies and then expecting students to use them effectively on their own, is it?
No, absolutely not. For these strategies to really stick, teachers need to help students internalize them
Mm.
to the point where they become more automatic, right?
Okay.
Something they do without having to consciously think about.
Okay.
Every single step, right? It's like learning to ride a bike.
Huh. Yeah.
At first you have to think about every movement, but eventually it just becomes
Yeah, second nature.
second nature, right?
Right. Okay, so we've got the thinking and learning strategies covered.
Mm-hmm.
But the paper also makes it really clear that SRL is more than just about how we process information,
Right.
right? Our motivation is a huge part of it too, isn't it?
It's absolutely crucial. Yeah.
Yeah.
And researchers in motivation were really some of the first to point out that just having those mental tools for learning isn't enough, right?
Yeah.
You also need the drive to actually pick them up and use them.
Right.
So this involves things like getting yourself started on learning activities,
Mm-hmm.
Valuing what you're learning, seeing its relevance,
Yeah.
and being able to sustain your effort to keep going even when things get tough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So you might set small achievable goals for yourself.
Yeah.
You might reward yourself for progress.
Yeah.
You might constantly remind yourself, why this learning is important to you in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Those are all kind of motivation strategies in action.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And the work of researchers like Bocartz herself, Pentrich, and others has really shown us that simply wanting to learn,
Right.
right? So having that motivation, that
It's
drives,
just as important as.
is just as important as knowing how to learn,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and the paper name drops some of the big names in motivation research here.
Mhm.
Bokertz, Korno, Pintrich, Ryan and Deci, Sansone, and Harakiewicz.
Right.
It sounds like there's a real deep well of knowledge to draw on in this area.
There is.
Yeah.
And their work has been really fundamental, I think, in showing just how interwoven motivation is
Yeah.
with self-regulated learning, right?
Yeah.
You can have all the best cognitive strategies, all the best tools,
Mm.
but if you're not motivated to pick them up and use them, they won't be very effective.
Right, exactly. Now the third key piece of the puzzle here seems to be volition.
Hmm.
Um, what exactly are volitional strategies, and how do they fit into this whole picture of self-regulation?
Yeah, so volitional strategies are all about but staying focused on your goals and your plans
Okay.
when you're faced with distractions or
Mhm.
challenges, right?
Yeah.
So they help you kind of stick to your commitments.
Mm-hmm.
Both in your studies and in other areas of life,
Yeah.
and to push through those inevitable obstacles
Right.
that pop up when you're trying to learn something new,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So think about things like managing your time effectively,
Mm-hmm.
actively resisting the urge to procrastinate,
Okay. Yeah.
um, focusing your attention
Yeah.
when you're feeling pulled in a million different directions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Researchers like Korno
Mm.
and Bolters and Rosenthal have made really significant contributions
Okay.
to our understanding of these strategies.
So if motivation is kind of what gets you going and keeps you generally interested, volition is what helps you kind of stay on the path day to day, dealing with those real world hurdles.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I
Yeah.
like that.
Okay. Okay. And then the paper also just briefly mentions coping strategies. How do those come into play?
Yeah, so coping strategies are what you use when you're experiencing those negative emotions that can sometimes arise.
Yeah.
From,
Yeah.
from setbacks or difficulties in your learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So think about feeling frustrated
Yeah.
when a concept just isn't clicking for you,
Right.
or
Right.
feeling anxious
Mm-hmm.
before a presentation or a test,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Coping strategies help you kind of manage those feelings,
Mm-hmm.
so that they don't completely derail
Right.
your learning efforts,
Yeah.
right? So things like taking a moment to just breathe,
Yeah.
talking to a friend for support,
Yeah.
or trying to reframe
Yeah.
a negative thought in
Yeah.
a more positive light.
Right.
Those would all be examples of coping strategies.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. And just like with the other types of strategies, the paper emphasizes that simply being aware of these motivation, volition, and coping strategies isn't enough. Right. You need to be able to actually use them
Right.
effectively and adaptively in different situations.
Right. Knowing about them is just the first step
Yeah.
towards making them this kind of natural part of your learning process.
Right, right. Okay, cool. So we've covered kind of the how of self-regulation, the strategies that we use.
Hmm.
But the paper also digs into kind of the why, and
Yeah.
and it says that understanding students' goals is central to understanding their self-regulation.
Hmm.
Why is that so important?
Well, because self-regulation, at its heart, is really about making choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
About directing your energy,
Yeah.
and those choices are driven by what you're trying to achieve, right? By your goals. If we don't understand those underlying goals,
Yeah.
it's really difficult to understand why someone is or isn't engaging
Right.
in these self-regulatory behaviors.
Yeah.
It's like trying to understand why someone's driving a car without knowing where they're actually trying to go.
Right, exactly, yeah. And it mentions something called a well-integrated goal hierarchy.
Mhm.
What does that actually mean kind of in practical terms?
Yeah, so think of it like this. You might have these smaller, more immediate goals,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like finishing a chapter by tonight,
Yeah.
or writing a certain number of words for an essay.
Mm.
And those are those are kind of like the stepping stones, right? To those larger, more overarching goals, right? Like mastering a new skill
Mm-hmm.
or completing a degree.
Right, right.
And for self-regulation to be really effective, all of those different levels of goals,
Mm-hmm.
they should ideally be kind of aligned, right?
Okay.
And working together
Yeah.
rather than kind of pulling you in different directions.
Yeah.
Right. And the research of Sheldon and Elliott,
Really, really highlights this interconnectedness of our goals.
yeah. The paper gives some examples of the different kinds of goals that students might have.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about, getting good grades, but it's also things like feeling competent, belonging to a group, helping others, their own well-being.
Yeah.
It's interesting that academic achievement isn't the only driver here.
Right.
So the key takeaway is that our learning isn't just driven by wanting to ace a test.
Yeah.
It's also driven by our needs to connect with others, to feel like we belong, to feel competent in what we're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. Learners are complex individuals, right?
Yeah.
With a whole range of motivations. And they might be striving to master a subject,
Mm-hmm.
but they might also, deeply care about fitting in socially,
Yeah.
contributing to their community.
Yeah. And just feeling good about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the research of Bokers, de Koning, and Vedder really explores this rich landscape of different types of goals.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And to actually achieve these goals, the paper talks about action programs or scripts.
Mhm.
Can you explain what those are in a more relatable way?
Sure. So think of it like your routine for getting ready in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have this kind of mental script
Okay.
for the order of things,
Right,
right?
right.
So maybe you brush your teeth before you shower,
Yeah.
or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
But similarly for learning, you kind of develop these mental sequences,
Mm-hmm.
these scripts for how you typically tackle different kinds of tasks, right?
Yeah.
So for a learning goal, it might be your go-to method
Mhm.
for studying for an exam. Right. For a social goal, it might be your usual way of starting a conversation with someone new.
Mm-hmm.
For a well-being goal,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's, the steps you follow to wind down before bed.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense that trying to juggle all these different goals, each with its own kind of set of scripts, could sometimes lead to
Right.
conflict.
Absolutely.
Right. The paper mentions that there's actually not a huge amount of research
Mm-hmm.
on how students actually prioritize and balance these competing goals.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really important area for future study.
It is because how you prioritize those goals
Yeah.
is going to significantly shape where you focus your attention
Mhm.
and where you direct your effort.
Yeah. And then the paper introduces this idea of goal preferences. So the objectives that are kind of personally meaningful and important to you.
Hmm.
And these seem to be really powerful drivers of
Yeah.
self-regulation.
They are. Yeah.
It talks about the difference between controlled motivation, so feeling like you have to do something
Mhm.
because of external pressure,
Mm.
and self-concordant goals. So
Yeah.
things that you genuinely want to do because they align with your own needs and values.
Exactly.
And it sounds like those self-concordant goals are the real winners when it comes to staying motivated and actually feeling good when you achieve them.
Yeah, that's a really key takeaway, I think,
Yeah.
from the work of Ryan and Connell, Ryan and Deci, Sheldon and Elliott.
Mm-hmm.
When your goals really resonate with who you are
Mm-hmm.
and what you truly care about,
Yeah.
you're much more likely to stick with them through those challenges
Mm-hmm.
and to experience that greater sense of satisfaction
Yeah.
when you reach them.
Okay, that makes sense. And the paper even shares some findings from a study by Heisen, Bokart, and Vader that looked at adolescents in these group learning situations. And they found that there was this connection between what goals were really important to these students. Things like getting social support, feeling like they belonged, and mastering the material,
Yeah.
and how engaged they were in the learning process,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the kids who really valued those things tended to be much more engaged in the learning.
Absolutely. And it even goes a little bit deeper than that, right?
Okay.
Contrasting those learning groups
Mm-hmm.
that were very effective
Yeah.
with those that were less so, right?
Okay.
And it turned out that a big part of that difference
Yeah.
was based on the goals that the students in those groups
Yeah.
tended to prioritize, right?
Yeah.
So effective teams really seem to value both learning and supporting each other's understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas less effective teams might have focused more on just, fitting in,
Right.
having fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
and kind of getting that certificate at the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this naturally influences what signals in the learning environment
Mm-hmm.
they pay attention to.
Yeah, so the effective teams are looking for cues about how to really understand the material and help each other learn,
Right.
while the less effective teams might be more focused on whether the activity is enjoyable, or if they feel accepted by the group.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of intuitive sense.
Yeah. Your goals really act as a filter, right?
Yeah.
Influencing what you notice and how you react
Mm-hmm.
to your surroundings.
Okay, okay. Which leads us to the next big question, right?
Yeah.
What are the specific cues in the learning environment that actually trigger our self-regulation strategies?
Yeah.
Um, it seems like our past learning experiences
Hmm.
play a big role here,
Yeah.
right? Shaping what we expect and what we believe about learning in different situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you've had really positive experiences, learning a particular subject
Mm-hmm.
or with a certain type of task, you're much more likely to approach similar situations with confidence
Right.
and a willingness to use those self-regulatory skills.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you've had, negative experiences in the past,
Mm-hmm.
that can create anxiety.
Yeah.
It can make you want to avoid
Yeah.
engaging
Right.
at all, right?
Right.
And the paper mentions Wenzel's research
Mm-hmm.
on how important it is to feel like you belong
Mm-hmm.
in that learning environment.
Right.
And this idea that a sense of social connection is really, really crucial.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And it lists a whole range of factors related to how instruction is delivered and how teachers behave
Mm-hmm.
that can influence self-regulation. Things like how clear the instructions are,
Mm,
the pace of the lesson, the overall structure,
right.
whether students feel like they have some autonomy,
Yeah.
the teacher's enthusiasm, even things like humor and fairness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it sounds like teachers have a really, really significant impact here,
They do. They do.
whether they're consciously thinking about self-regulation or not.
Absolutely, yeah. Students kind of develop these internal mental pictures, right,
Mm.
of what good and bad learning situations
Yeah.
look like based on these kinds of cues.
Mm-hmm.
And the work of Frida suggests that these mental pictures can even automatically trigger emotions. Right. So you might walk into a classroom and just based on the way the desks are arranged or
Yeah.
the tone of the teacher's voice,
Yeah.
you might automatically start to feel bored,
Right.
or really engaged,
Yeah.
right? Because you've come to associate those kinds of cues with those emotions
Mm-hmm.
in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is where this idea of non-conscious decision making
Mhm.
comes in, right? The paper talks about how a lot of our goals can become activated
Right.
without us even realizing it.
Absolutely, yeah. So Barg and Chartrand
Mm-hmm.
talk about this idea of the unbearable automaticity of being, right?
Right.
So how much of our behavior is actually driven by these unconscious processes?
Mm-hmm.